I'm Anvesha, Deputy Director at Nat Health, and I'm so excited to be back again to cover another aspect of Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. We have been running this series since last couple of months in collaboration with the National Health Authority, and almost every week we have an eminent speaker come on this platform and share their insights on one aspect of the ABDM. We've already covered many of the areas like on insurance, design, its architecture, UHI, privacy, and data security, and many more. Today, we will be discussing learnings from international experiences on ABDM, and to discuss this topic, we have two very eminent speakers with us. Dr. Krishna Uday Kumar, who is the founding director of Duke Global Health Innovation Center and Executive Director of Innovations in Healthcare, and our very own Dr. Dennis Strevela, who's a globally recognized expert in digital health. He's Professor of Medical Informatics at the University of Hawaii. Due to time zone difference, both our speakers could not join live, but they'll be sharing their views through previously recorded message. Please feel free to ask your questions. We will ensure that our speakers answer all your questions that will be posted on our blog, www.nathealthseries.com. Let me formally introduce both our speakers. Dr. Krishna Uday Kumar is the founding director of the Duke Global Health Innovation Center and Executive Director of Innovations in Healthcare, a nonprofit co-funded by Duke, McKinsey and Company, and World Economic Forum to curate and scale the impact of transformative health solutions globally. At Duke University, Dr. Uday Kumar holds the rank of Associate Professor of Global Health and Medicine. He also serves as Associate Director for Innovation of the Duke Global Health Institute. His work has been published in leading academic journals such as the New England Journal of Medicine, Health Affairs, and Academic Medicine. He's born in Bangalore. He spent his childhood in Virginia and is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of Virginia with a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies with distinction. A very warm welcome to you, sir. We are so delighted to have you with us. Dr. Krishna Kumar will be speaking on lessons learned in digital space internationally and what could be applied to the future of the digital space in India. Over to you, sir.
Hi, my name is Krishna Uday Kumar, and I'm the founding director of the Duke Global Health Innovation Center at Duke University in the US. It's my great pleasure to join you today to talk a bit about some of the lessons that we've learned from studying health systems and innovators around the world and how that might be applied to the future of digital health in India. I'm going to start by sharing just a few slides that hopefully will help us think through some of the principles and guidelines and lessons learned. First, I want to start by thinking about how we keep the end in mind in thinking about the role of digital and data. Secondly, share what we've learned from studying both leading innovators as well as leading systems around the world, and end by trying to capture some lessons learned on high-value health systems. Just a bit about our work at Duke. We have a Duke Global Health Innovation Center, like I mentioned, that's really at the cutting edge of trying to develop stronger evidence, do the policy analysis, and develop education training related to the role of innovation, entrepreneurship, and policy in supporting health around the world. We also host a nonprofit called Innovations in Healthcare that 11 years ago was co-founded by Duke, along with McKinsey and Company and the World Economic Forum. And it's really about finding and supporting the best innovators in the world to help improve high quality, affordable care to everyone around the world. When I think about the role of digital health and especially data and the policies around data, I go back to thinking about what it is we're trying to solve for. And unfortunately, too many of our health systems around the world look like the representation on the left-hand side here, that they are often supply driven in terms of the way that they're financed. They often have many fragmented practitioners that are not jointly accountable for the value of the care that they're providing. And it's set up in a way that makes innovation harder. So the patient is certainly not in the middle. It tends to be reactive, unaligned, and uncoordinated. Now, if we want to talk about the role of digital, we have to then think about what is the system we're trying to design. And I would suggest that the system principles look much more like what I've represented on the right-hand side here. So it has to be person-driven. It has to be based on the needs of the individual and the community that we're trying to serve. It has to have very strong primary care as the anchor of that system. It has to also enable integrated access to specialty care. It has to make sure that we're not forgetting about access to pharmaceuticals, devices, other types of innovations. And finally, we have to recognize that health is not just about healthcare. It very much is driven by access to high quality and affordable social services. So a system really at its core has to be able to integrate all of these components and make them as friendly to the user, the person at the center, as it possibly can. And that, to me, is the role of data, is that entire circle as the integrator and really the core of how to create demand-driven systems that ensure that there's alignment across the policies, the payment systems, the integration of all of the capabilities of those systems, and finally, that it allows for innovation to take hold and scale effectively. So with that in mind, some of the work that we have done globally has been to look at the global evidence for who is actually improving at either a micro or macro level population health, and who's doing that through the provision of high value health or health services. We've looked at this across the world, as you can see from the map, in low income, middle income, and high income countries. So everything from some of the work that's happening in the US in some of our leading health systems and their application of future looking innovation with the policies to enable them, to places like Germany and looking at how different providers and policymakers were able to come together on a regional basis, all the way to countries like Rwanda, where public and private partnerships are really enabling stronger access to care around the world. Now, what we have learned from all of this analysis is really a series of lessons for policymakers, and this gets at its core to, again, what's the role of digital and health data. So first is policymakers and payers for health services have to be able to enable providers to have access to better data. That includes financial data as well as health data, because those providers at the end of the day, if they're going to provide care that's high value and accountable, have to be able to monitor the cost, track their revenues, make sure that they're enabling the right types of utilization, and at the end of the day, are able to tie their work to real health outcomes. Secondly, there has to be a pathway for policymaking that enables investment and other decision-making from providers. That means providing a stepwise, predictable approach to implementing different types of payments, performance measures, and data systems that all emphasize providing both higher quality and higher value of care. And finally, the same way that we try to use as much as possible evidence-based care in the way that we provide health services, we also have to make a stronger commitment to evidence-based policymaking. So there should be a commitment by policymakers to generate and use data over time so that we are strengthening the evidence base for our own policies. For providers, there has to be at its core a stronger investment in the ways to collaborate across providers and with our communities. And that includes investment in clinical leadership as well as creating shared values. The second point here is critical to the topic we're talking about, which is to develop and invest in the data and technology infrastructure that's not a silo provider by provider, but enables stronger access to interoperability across providers and across platforms. It has to also provide access to longitudinal data to identify different patient populations, risk stratify, and address needs, both health and social, over time. And third, we have to be able to shift our care away from facilities like hospitals and just providers like physicians to thinking about multidisciplinary teams and more toward community and home-based care. And data plays a critical role in making sure that that can happen. When we put all the pieces together here, what we get to is a vision for high-value health systems and the role of data and digital health. First and foremost, it has to be person and community centered in the work that it does. It has to have policies that support value creation for the people and communities it serves. It has to be anchored by the payment systems and financing that promote accountability for outcomes and alignment across various aspects and different providers. It has to make sure that all of these organizations develop the right competencies and expertise needed to achieve value at the care delivery level, and that includes very much the data infrastructure to drive high value care. And it has to then create the enabling environment for transformative innovations to take hold and to scale effectively. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on the top left and the bottom right components. So what do we know about policy, specifically health data policies? And then what do we know about really transformative innovations? I'll describe some of the work we've done around health policies in the context of both East Africa and West Africa as another way to bring in global lessons learned. Over the last 5 years, we've worked as a consortium with Broadreach Healthcare, Gembi Health Systems, as well as collaborators in East Africa around IGA, the Intergovernmental Agency on Development, and West Africa with ECOWAS and the West African Health Organization, really to develop a better understanding of how to improve health outcomes by stronger use of health data and innovation from a digital health perspective. And what that has allowed us to get to are 6 principles for data sharing and data protection. And hopefully these are valuable in the Indian context as well as to how you create the anchor to partner with the community and across organizations on data sharing and protection. Starting from the top left, first and foremost, there has to be legitimacy, consent, and transparency. So those whose data is being captured have to understand and meaningfully consent to that collection, processing, and sharing of health data. So there have to be ethics and an agreed upon way that show that there's a legitimate use for this data. Second, there has to be clarity around the purpose and the relevance. So what data is being captured has to feed directly into why it's being used and how it's going to help the people who are providing this data. That includes having data controllers and processors in place and making sure that data is used only for the purposes that it is agreed upon. Third, we have to talk about data security, confidentiality, and storage. So health data has to be stored and protected against unintended use or theft. There have to be appropriate security safeguards, and it shouldn't be stored longer than is necessary for its appropriate use. Fourth, data sharing and transfer principles have to be in place. So it should be transferred only to other secure, accessible, standardized places and ways in timely manners. Next, the access to data is critically important. So who has access has to be clearly defined and the rationale for data access. And then finally, there has to be high quality in the data that's captured and used to make policy as well as practice decisions. So the data collection, processing, and sharing has to be all done with data quality standards in place and ensuring that the dimensions of quality include accuracy, completeness, consistency, validity, timeliness, and uniqueness so that we don't have redundancy. From a policymaking perspective, these principles can ensure that the right data policies are unleashing the power of innovation to make sure that we're improving individual and population health and helping to inform the future of data health and health innovation. Similarly, going from the policy lens to the innovation lens, some of the global lessons that we have learned have come from our network of more than 100 innovators, many of them operating in India, but also operating in more than 90 countries around the world, doing everything from developing next generation digital health tools to developing new business models for delivering those tools to the people who need them most. And I'll end with some of the lessons that we've learned and that lend to opportunities for disruption, especially using digital solutions. First, it has to be, as I mentioned around the vision, about people. So who are we trying to serve? Who's the consumer? Who's the patient? And can we align to make sure that we're serving their needs as opposed to disrupting their needs? Second, and this is the core role of digital health, can we disrupt the delivery model by using digital health technologies? And in many ways, this is flipping on its head how we define the principles of a health system. We don't build health systems in the future by building hospitals and then clinics. We build it by developing digital solutions and providing them through mobile phone technology to the patients, the family units, and the communities that need them. And only when we can't do that do we provide home-based services, community-based services, clinics, and finally hospitals only when they're needed. Third, we have to couple the digital technology to the workforce for any of this to be workable. So we have to think about professional assumptions, right skilling the workforce. Fourth, there's a great role for digital tools and digital health to be able to standardize our operating procedures, which will enable a reduction in variation and in turn lead to more consistent, higher quality care. Fifth, we have to think about digital as an enabler of asset-light business models. Too often, when we think about healthcare, we think about expensive buildings, expensive equipment, and expensive people providing care. And the disruption we can do through digital is really addressing all three of those barriers to affordability. And then finally, unlocking the power of data. We've heard all the hype about artificial intelligence and machine learning being able to improve health and healthcare. Most of it has been just hype, but we are starting to see, especially in low resource settings, the real value of enabling digital health and data science solutions to improve health and healthcare. And we're really just at the cusp. But to do that, we have to unlock the right policies. We have to make sure that payment and financing systems are creating accountability and alignment. We have to invest in the right tools, including the data tools, to allow providers of care and social services to innovate. And finally, we have to unlock and unleash innovation so that we're improving population and individual health along the way. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share these lessons learned today. I am sorry that I can't join you in person or live, just given the time zone, but very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you and wish you the best of luck in this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your insightful presentation. And I'm sure our viewers would have immensely enjoyed and learned from your session. I would now welcome Dr. Dennis Trevella to say a few words. Dr. Dennis is a computer scientist and medical informaticist who has devoted a half-century to improving the world's health systems by applying digitization and computerization to the processes of healthcare, clinical, financial, and social. We still have a long, long way to go, he says, in attempting to reach the same level of efficiency and productivity benefits that other industries have enjoyed for decades now. As a global expert in digital health, his work in India and China in the recent 5 years continues after having consulted in more than 70 countries around the globe with the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the World Health Organization, GIZ German Corporation, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and others. At home in Hawaii, Dennis is a professor of medical informatics in the Information and Computer at the University of Hawaii, where he teaches courses in systems design, medical informatics, health informatics, and nursing informatics. He holds a master's degree in computer science from the University of Hawaii and a PhD in medical informatics from the University of California at San Francisco Medical School. Today, he will be talking on India's challenge to deploy digital health to produce better health outcomes for all Indians by rewiring all healthcare stakeholders in India to improve service integration, intercommunication, and professional collaboration. He will be talking about the challenges and the importance of public-private collaboration to achieve the digital health milestones. Over to you, sir.
This is Dennis Strebler speaking. I'm speaking to you from a nice, little bit blistery for Hawaii winter day here in Hawaii, overlooking the Oko'olau Mountains. It's my pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I will get my camera set up here before it all falls on the floor and tame this technology that we have to work with today. There we go. Hello, everyone, again. I've been asked to speak about international experiences in digital health. I'll be with you for a few minutes, and I hope you find this program interesting. Let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Dennis Strebler. I'm professor of medical informatics here at the University of Hawaii. And my experience is 15 years or so in Silicon Valley, a stint at which was chief strategist at perhaps the most successful medical internet firm called WebMD. Several years as program manager of IT at Kaiser Permanente in California, and also my work with international organizations in perhaps 25 countries in recent years and 80 countries altogether over my lifetime, where I have attempted to advocate for the use of digital health to improve the world's health systems. So that's a little bit about myself. Let's get started. So why is digital health important? I've been using the term AEEQ in a lot of my writings of recent years, because I think we always have to have some metric to allow ourselves to measure progress. And I'm not so sure that commercially digital health has been focused very well. It seems to me that the object of computerization is computers and not improvements in health. So we need a set of metrics to say, no, it's not about computers, it's about improving health. And so I've come up with this formula, which I call AEEQ, to look at 4 aspects of healthcare delivery and to see if computers will have a positive impact on those. So first is access, and its name implies access by the population, but it's also access to the population by providers. It's access to medical information so that patients can help manage their own healthcare. So there are many facets of access, all of which digital technology can help. So those are some areas of concern and of interest in the A moniker of AEEQ. Second is equity. If we're going to have a healthy society, and I think COVID made this crystal clear to all of us in the world, the whole world needs to be healthy. And so, especially with infectious disease, if we cannot contain an infection, then it's going to prohibit all of us who are well placed to deal with adversity. It's going to make our life more miserable. And I'm sure we all carry the sentiment, as we certainly do here in Hawaii, of being tired of the COVID restrictions. So the way that we deal with it in general is to make sure that our systems are equitable and can reach as many people down the economic ladder, down the education ladder, down the literacy ladder as possible. Thirdly, and perhaps the area in which computers shine, is efficiency. You know, I hear from payers that, oh my gosh, it takes us 3 months or 6 months or even 3 weeks to pay a claim. Well, why is this? I'm sure we all have been involved with transactions in the e-commerce arena, which gets settled instantaneously. I remember making a purchase in Old Delhi one day by credit card, and my phone beeped immediately as I made the transaction, saying that my bank account here back in Hawaii had been debited. So we have the will and the way to pay claims and settle debts almost instantaneously this day. So it's a question of how much efficiency we want to add, how much productivity we want to add, how many middle steps we want to throw out to make a process more efficient. So certainly the world has learned a lot from the efficiency gained by other sectors by applying information technology. So I think it's about time that health gets serious about this. Finally, of course, none of those really matter unless we have quality. Of course, defining quality is easier said than done. I always tell my graduate students that if they can define quality with a definition which we would all accept, they will get an instant degree because, of course, it's not easy. And again, we need proxy measures of quality. And those proxy measures, no matter which ones you would like to concentrate on, require masses of information. And so how do we get masses of digital information? We get it through digital health. So we can't expect to improve quality in the world unless we improve the information flows in the world, which are fragmented, lacking in timeliness, and lacking also in accuracy in many cases. They also can be politically maneuvered and altered, and this has been a problem of passing information between various political layers since, I suppose, the beginning of time. So our quest is to find information systems which can improve access, equity, efficiency, and quality. And why do we do this? Of course, the overall overarching goal is to improve the health care of all Indians. Now, how do we go about implementing these systems? I'm always asked, how do we get uptake? How do we get advocacy? How do we get adoption? We do it through a power of partnership. It is the one and only way that countries who have been successful in digital health have prospered. My favorite word is the word of coopetition. Obviously a mixture of cooperation and competition. And let me tell you a little story. When I worked in Silicon Valley, we had a lunch truck outside on Fort Henry Road, and many of us from the neighborhood would meet there at lunchtime to have our lunch. And it was probably the most interesting time of the day because we would hear Intel and IBM talking about a new project they're going to do together, Microsoft and WebMD doing a project together. This doesn't mean that there wasn't competition. There was huge competition. In fact, fierce competition. But the beauty and power of cooperation, where there was a win-win for both sides, led the day. And I'm often asked when I travel around the world by countries who are trying to improve their tech sector, how can they create a Silicon Valley-like environment? My best answer to them is the way that one does it is by mixing people and by finding areas where more than one person can win, where the competition works to the advantage of all. And that doesn't mean they don't remain severe competitors and you might say enemies, at least economic enemies, but it doesn't preclude their ability or interest in cooperating together. So call it collaboration, call it cooperation, call it a certain kind of trust but verify, which the superpowers used in the final days of the Cold War. Find ways for there to be financial interplay. And this was also striked and improved by the fact that there were many mergers going on. While I was at WebMD, we merged with 33 companies at the time. It was a merger every day, it seemed. So this financial interplay where, in fact, one boosts one's receptivity, one boosts one's attractiveness to the financial world, can be a winner for everyone. So it's time to get out of the cubby holes in which we live and look at a world where there could be more co-opetition. Now, co-opetition between whom? First, let's talk about co-opetition between the public and private health sectors. As we all know, there's a razor edge balance of power between these two. In most countries, yes, including my observations in India, there's a certain amount of impolitic disagreements and unfortunate kinds of body language between these two sectors. And in fact, it's natural. We should expect a natural tendency and a natural tension between the sectors because they have different roles and they have different capacities, as we all know. But can we co-opt those that are the most powerful, that are the most useful, and find ways to create co-opetition? So the countries that have succeeded the most in digital health, I'll use Estonia as an example. It's a very, very small country, as you know. It's in the Baltic Sea area. It's always threatened by Russia in this day and age of political power. But it found an early path in its small 3 million population to create a digital health system, which in many ways has not been equaled in the world still. And they did it by putting down the gauntlet. Now that the Soviet Union was no longer the enemy, they put down the gauntlet and said, how can we work together to create a better Estonia? And so they both of them strove for high quality in the sector. They said, our goal is to create this high quality. So along with A, E, and E, they focused on quality. How can we measure quality? How can we enforce quality? How can we recognize where quality was being compromised? So they let the private sector do what it does well. And I think this is a lesson for India as well. Obviously, there is no one in India who can deliver higher quality, high tech, advanced tertiary healthcare and do it on a consistent basis. So let's engage the private sector to continue to focus in this area and to work with creating a health delivery environment in India, which is second to none. This can include offshoots to medical tourism. It can be have many other economic benefits to your country. So at the same time, let's let the public sector do what it does best, and that is to deliver primary and secondary health care. But however, if we stratify the market this way, that means we need a referral system which can link these two and to do it well, so that good candidates for tertiary care get referred to the private sector, and ongoing monitoring of chronic disease and other NCDs is done in the public sector until there's an acute episode. So if we could find a way of making it easy or easier for people to move back and forth between the sectors, and by that way, that means having their information also move back and forth between sectors, we could optimize the strength of each sector in its own environment. Now, there can be some overlap, and there can be contracting, and there can be many other ways of making this work besides just having the patient move between sectors. But they all require good digital health to be in place. Oh, I wanted to give also an example from Queensland, Australia, which always typifies and epitomizes to me this balance between the private sector and the public sector. I was visiting a new hospital, very large one, I think 1,300 beds in Brisbane, Australia, on my last visit to Queensland, which was quite some years ago, even before COVID. And I remember saying and taking them up on an opportunity to tour the new hospital. And during the tour, we saw Australia's high quality system, responsive system. I think we all are aware that the Australian system may be one of the best in the world in terms of meeting the needs of Australian patients. And so at the end of the day, I asked my host, by the way, is this a public hospital or a private hospital? And he looked a bit dumbfounded at me with the question, and he gave it some thought before he answered. Most countries in the world, we would immediately say which sector it belonged to. But he said, Dennis, listen to this. The hospital and all of its equipment and all of its technology is owned by the state. Provision of healthcare is completely in the private sector. And I thought to myself, only if we had such cooperation, coopetition in the United States, which we do not have, as you all know. And perhaps it's a better model even than the National Health Service in the UK, where it's perhaps too lopsided towards the public health sector. At least many people in the world might say so. So maybe India can come closer to the ideal, in my mind, which Australia sets for us. So that the capital investment is done mainly by the state, and the manpower, the human resources in health is mainly provided by the private sector. So there are various ways to create this razor edge balance of power, or to keep it in alignment so that neither side dominates the other. They should be some type of equilibrium between the two sectors, in my opinion. Now, the other balance of power we have to discuss is the balance of power between the payer, in this case, the new National Health Authority, and providers in the country, whether they be public or private. We have to realize also this is a very flimsy and slightly hard to maintain as a balance of power. It can fall out of balance quite easily. Either there can be too many sticks by the payer and therefore aggravate passive aggressiveness by the provider, or the provider can also pull out and say, no, I'm not going to participate. And therefore, many patients lose the ability to have this new synergy between the two sectors. We have to realize that these two entities will always come from different economic incentives. That's just the fact of life. And so to keep those two in balance, what we need to have are very good communication between the two. Rate setting should be somewhat of a joint effort. Let me give you an example from Kaiser Permanente, where I was technology director for a few years. Every year we had a conference called the Tahoe Conference at Lake Tahoe in California, where the providers, that is the Permanente Medical Group, met with the insurance company, that is Kaiser Foundation Health Plan, which were completely at arm's length with each other, by the way. Most people don't understand how Kaiser Permanente is actually organized. But the medical group is a for-profit medical group. The insurance company is a non-for-profit medical group. So in many ways, it mimics the situation in India quite well. By the way, just for completeness, there's a third entity under the Kaiser Permanente umbrella called Kaiser Foundation Hospitals, which actually owns the real estate, somewhat like the Australia model. So anyway, these 2 or 3 entities get together once a year. And of course, the providers say they need more money in their next contract for the following year. And the insurance companies say, no, you're not going to get it. And I've been present in some of these meetings. They can be shouting matches. They're not always the most pleasant meetings to be in. But by the end of the day, they somehow reached an equilibrium, agreeing on the contract for the next year. So this is the hard-fought territory of how to keep this balance of power between payer and provider. The provider should not allow the payer to dictate unilaterally fee schedules, in my opinion. And there's no reason that they should if the provider who will be contracted with the payer has an open mind and can discuss the issues in a collaborative way. So these need to be open and ongoing. They need to be relatively formal. And the payer, in your case, the NHA, will need to be transparent and have clarity in its policy decisions so that everyone knows what will be paid, what will not be paid, how it will be paid, how quickly it will be paid, what to do with rejected claims, et cetera, et cetera. So these policies are very important to maintain the trust between the parties. The razor edge of balance of power is very important. And in both cases, between the sectors and between payer and provider, this comes through the use of information, the use of good information systems on both sides, so that they can counter the information that the other has. So finally, what does a successful digital health mission in India look like? From my perspective, having seen countries both succeed and fail, I'm happy to give you lists of both. However, they will not be done in public. But I've seen too many fail. I've also seen some succeed. We're all succeeding. I would hope we would succeed more quickly. So what are those ingredients? First, that all stakeholders have and exercise ownership in the process. That is, this process of improving health in India through a new regime of payments and contracts needs to be owned by both sides. It's not possible for only one side to do it, and it's not possible to be half-hearted in one's ownership. One has to take a deliberate stand. I've had talks with Siddhartha over the last few years, and I've recommended that NatHealth take a very deliberate and collaborative stand, which I see has been being done. And this seminar series is certainly an example of NatHealth's outreach in this area. But find every opportunity you can to be the partners of the other stakeholders in India, and for each health provider in India to be partners of the other. Do away with as much duplication and redundancy as possible, and collaborate where you can. It will save you money, and it will save the country money. The second part is that both public and private sectors must strive to be better integrated into a single healthcare system. From the Indian patient's point of view, one day perhaps they don't need to care whether they're being treated in the public system or the private system. They go to the public system for the things it does best. They go to the private system with referrals or direct referral for the things it does best. And it benefits by the fact that the two will exchange information so that we have continuity of care between the two. That's the ideal for us all to strive for, and for digital health to aim at. Now, the providers must fight, and forgive my English, fight like hell to keep prices fair and stable. This is your job. You will do it. It's not easy. There will be some very tense times, but that's your job to make sure that those payments don't fall to an area, to a level which you cannot sustain yourself. Of course, there will be pressures on you to reduce your fees and to avoid increasing your fee schedule. You need to fight for fairness and stability. By stability, I mean let's not have a sawtooth increase in prices. We should have a general stable increase in prices year to year and avoid the big upsets when there has to be a huge increase in prices to catch up with costs. And finally, you need to fight for timely payments. One of the ways that providers can be more collaborative is if they were to get paid fairly and on time. And I think we discussed this a little bit earlier. On time can mean seconds, it can mean minutes, it can mean at most days, in my opinion. If a payment comes 3 months later, this is going to engender a huge distrust. In my talks with NHA, I'm going to continue to emphasize this fact, that we find ways of improving the timeliness of payments. Now, payers also have to fight like hell to wring out high quality from their spending of every rupee. We cannot afford wasted procedures. We cannot afford duplicate lab tests. We cannot afford waiting for a disease to progress to stage 4 when it should have been treated at stage 1, because that only costs more money and more death. So payers must fight like hell to improve quality across the spectrum. And of course, how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to do it through feeds from digital health. So I think it's clear where I'm going with this. Both providers and payers must arm themselves in this new financial war, if you will, with the very best technology so they can mine information and maintain this tenuous truce. Countries that succeed have payers and providers who respect each other, who work together, who trust each other with verification, and who find a way to say at the end of the day, we have a common goal, and that is to improve the health of our people. Go India. Goodbye.
That was indeed an incredible session. Thank you so much for your insightful words. While we mark our foot in the digital health space, there is much we can learn from the international space. It was one of the most exciting and inspiring sessions today. Many thanks to all of you for joining our session today, and our special thanks to Dr. Dennis and Dr. Krishna Uday Kumar for coming on this platform and enlightening us on one of the most important aspects of the ABDM. I'm requesting our audience to keep their questions flowing. We will ensure from our side that all your questions will be answered by our speakers through our blog, nathealthseries.com. I would also like to express my thanks to the entire NHA team for their support in running this series. NatHealth is also organizing its flagship event on March 28th and 29th. It will be in digital mode, which is physical and virtual. So please register yourself if you have not done that already. And you'll find the registration details on all our social media platforms. For more information about upcoming events and webinars, keep reading our blog and follow us on our YouTube and social media handles. You can watch all our past videos, including this one, on our YouTube and Facebook handles. The NHA NatHealth ABDM series had witnessed around 10 such sessions, and each of the sessions is unique, educative, and informative. We hope to keep our discussions alive on our forums. It has been a very enriching experience with you all. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Bye-bye and take care. Have a wonderful evening.